What is going on, boys and girls? Welcome to this first edition of Q&A here on Brent Allen Outdoors. I am Brent Allen, and the purpose of these videos is to simply answer your questions that you guys have sent out to me over various social media platforms, but mostly over the various YouTube videos that I've posted. Without further ado, let's just go ahead and dive into this. Okay, so the first question, and this question is probably the one I get asked the most, especially on videos where I'm fishing really heavy cover. And the question is, what is that weed puller thing that you're using? Where do I buy one? How do I make it? How do I find it? The response that I always give is that these are homemade weed pullers that my dad makes, my uncle makes. It's something that is always kind of being developed, as new versions of it are made. We've kind of find out the weaknesses, how it could be better. Let me show you this weed puller in a little more detail. What this is, it's just an angled piece of metal that's been welded onto a telescoping pole. There's really nothing complicated about this. Now, with it being this kind of narrow piece of metal here, this really allows you to open up a hole without pretty much pulling every piece of vegetation out at the same time. But again, as you can see, there's really nothing to this. It's just a piece of angled metal welded onto this pole. It's just kind of painted so it looks nicer. And now at the other end here, it's just a little rubber handle, and that's just what comes on the pole that you buy. The length of this, it's about 10 foot. Actually, I think it's a little bit less than 10 foot. These best work with 10-foot rods. Anything longer than a 10-foot rod, you're going to find that it's just, your fishing rod is going to be longer than you can reach with the puller. So I would recommend probably a 10-foot rod if you're going to be pulling holes with something like this. To address the main question that I always get asked, no, these are not for sale. You cannot go buy these. We have talked about making some of these available. I'll be honest, I don't foresee it happening. Maybe it will, but I don't foresee it happening. Best thing I can say to you is to make your own. Like, a lot of the guys I see on the water simply use like rakes. They just reach it on out there and pull open a hole. It's literally the same thing. Just this is a little more optimized to do the kind of thing that we're doing. But yeah, basically that's all that's in this weed puller here. I mean, you could probably JB weld something on if you don't have access to like a fabricator. But anyway, this is all it is. I wish I could tell you that I have it available to purchase, but who knows? Maybe down the road a ways, and if that day does come, you guys will absolutely be the first to know. So the next question up here is from Mad Skills PB. And he says, "Hey Brent, do you ever run braid? I'm always paranoid about getting broken off in this heavy Florida grass. Also, do you always target shallower water? My lakes have a typical Florida bowl shape with gradual taper and edge grass at 2 to 10 foot. Should I be targeting shallower water or working the deeper grass edges?" So, first part of that question, do I ever run braid? No, I do not. Nothing against braid. I'm just a mono guy. Always have been. My dad is a braid fisherman, and sometimes when I go down there, if I don't bring my rods, I'll use one of his. And the thing I'll say about braid is you definitely can feel more than you can with mono. But for me, it's like it's such a sensitive line that it feels like abrasive when you're jigging. And maybe this is just me, but I prefer the feel of mono. And honestly, for speck fishing, bluegill fishing, shell crackers, any kind of panfish that you're vertical jigging, it doesn't matter. It really does not matter. Like, if I do break a line and that kind of stuff, it's just because I'm not checking my line for any kind of imperfections, maybe any, if I get a gar or something and I forget to check the line to make sure it's not messed up. And I have seen braid break. So it's not like braid is the end all be all. The line stuff is totally personal preference. So what I would recommend for anyone, this is unrelated to the question, but for anyone that is kind of getting into speck fishing, I would say maybe just try both. See which one feels better to you. Because honestly, I mean, I know a lot of braid guys. I know a lot of mono and fluoro guys. It's really just personal preference. As long as you're not fishing like freaking 2-pound test monofilament, vertical jigging, and especially heavy cover, I would never ever recommend that. You at least want to be 6 pound or above with monofilament if you're fishing heavy cover. So yeah, so to answer your question, no, I do not use braid. I solely use monofilament. And as a matter of fact, this is the line that I'm currently using, this Trilene Extra Tough 6 pound low vis. And I like the low vis line. I like the way it looks in the water because you can't really see it. And I know the fish don't care because I have fished with high vis line and they do not care whatsoever. So don't let anyone tell you that, you're using orange line or fluorescent green line and the fish are going to see it and be spooked. They don't care. One iota. I prefer the look of the low vis line. And so you mentioned that you're always paranoid about getting broken off in heavy cover. Honestly, you can't think about that. You just got to get in it and get it done. Like I said, 9 times out of 10 when I'm fishing 6 pound test and the heaviest freaking nastiest cover you can think of, I never have a problem. Unless I have a crappy tie onto my jig, which has happened admittedly, but since I've started using uni knots, that hasn't been an issue so much. So yeah, don't waste your time being paranoid about that. Jigs are a dime a dozen, whether you're using hair jigs or plastics. Just if you break off, tie another one, get back in there. That or bring more than one rod with you and you're not wasting much time. Just grab another rod, keep going. So the next part of the question is if I always target shallower water. And the answer to that is no. It really depends on the time of the season. So like right now we're in mid-February. The crappie spawn is in complete full swing. At least here in Central Florida. Leading up to this time, the fish will really be in and out of, going deep, coming back shallow. It depends on cold fronts. There's a lot to it. The moon phase, there's just... I wish I could tell you I had all the answers to how these fish decide to do what they do. But anyone that thinks that they have all the answers, they don't. They absolutely don't. These fish are super spontaneous at times. And as soon as you think you got them figured out, they fool you. So, but yeah, no, I don't only target shallow water. But this time of year, when the spawn is in full swing in Florida, I am... usually in the shallows. During the really cold days, if you get like a cold snap, them fish are going to move deeper. So on really cold days, I would suggest if you're into spider rigging or pulling minnows behind the boat, that would be a good technique during cold days. But in most moderate temperature days during the spawn, you can find them in the shallow water. And as far as like you mentioned like the Florida bowl shape with gradual taper, I agree. And like probably 90% of the lakes I fish, it's exactly like that. Our lakes here in Florida, there's not much variation to the bottom. Like they all pretty much do the same thing. I mean, every once in a while you're going to find a deep pocket somewhere along the way, but most of them have just this gradual boring taper. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty typical in Florida. And then, so you're asking if you should be targeting shallower water or working the deeper grass edges. Again, going back on, the time of the year and the temperature, cold fronts, that whole thing, that's what you need to take into consideration as far as where you're going to target these fish. And even some days when you're doing all the right things, it still may not happen for you. I would suggest, doing a little more reading on crappie, their patterns and stuff during the spawn and outside of the spawn. There's so much information out there, and especially now with the internet being the way it is, there's endless information for you to get. Okay, next up we have a question from 2005 Pilot, and this is on the shallow water vertical jigging tutorial video that I have. He says, absolutely a master class on jigging. Thank you for sharing. Are you still using the same 11-foot ACC rod? I'm in the market for a new lightweight jigging rod and reel. Does the rear seat make it more balanced and easier to use all day? So firstly, thank you very much for the kind words. That's actually not the first time someone said that's a master class, which... I mean, I wouldn't really consider it a masterclass, but hey, I'll take it. But yeah, so thank you for that. And then, so the 11-foot ACC, I use that rod all the freaking time. Not so much when I'm in Okeechobee, because usually we're fishing either really heavy cover or heavy standing cover like bulrush or cattails, and using an 11-foot rod of any sort, it's kind of pain in the butt. So I'll usually stick to a 10-foot for doing stuff like that. The rear seat is the way to go. I first started out doing mid-seat. I think this is another one of those personal preference things, but I feel like most people are going to be happier with a rear seat just because it does offer a better balance, in my opinion. I think it also depends on the reel that you put on these jigging rods. I'm a firm believer in the B&M Ban 01, which you can see on pretty much all my gear videos. I talk about it. But it's just a small little reel, and the sole purpose of it is to hold line. And then when you need more, if you break a jig off, you can just pull more line out. You know, you're not reeling anything with it. It's just to hold line. But it's a super lightweight plastic reel. That's what I would recommend for any kind of vertical jigging rod. It's a great reel. For as inexpensive as they are, typically around $20, they freaking last really well. I keep them kind of oiled up a little bit. I don't believe I've had one fail on me yet. Yeah, that's what I recommend for a reel. As far as like, you know, you're in the market for something, you know, it's a tough call because especially now there's more vertical jigging rods available than ever before. It's another one of those things I'd say you might have to experiment around until you find the one that fits you. What I would recommend if you were to ask for a personal preference, so yeah, ACC crappie sticks, and I've also really been loving the Ozark hybrid. It's a little bit more, I guess, limber is the right word, compared to like an ACC crappie sticks. But it's also more fun to pull and fish because it doesn't have quite as much backbone as an ACC. Man, is it fun pulling in big old slabs with that thing. So, yeah, you know, it's I would say between those two companies, there's a few other new ones out. I think Mafia rods. I will occasionally come across people pushing those. I've never used one before, so I can't speak to the quality or how it holds up. Usually most places you go that sell any kind of crappie stuff, you're probably going to see ACC available or B&M. Ozark you will not find. That will be something you have to order directly from Ozark. Honestly, probably just go with ACC. They're well-balanced rods, they're affordable, and it's a great introduction into the sport of vertical jigging. And pair that with a Ban 01 reel from B&M, dude, you're set. As far as the balance and being able to use it all day long, you know, I used to talk about jigging fatigue quite a bit, and honestly, the more that you do it, the more kind of muscle memory you get built up. So as long as you're not using a real heavy rod, I think you're going to be fine. But most guys are going to use a 10-foot rod for doing this kind of fishing. And 10-foot is going to keep you relatively balanced and lightweight. As soon as you start going to 11-foot and above, you're going to notice that weight difference. Even on my 11-foot ACC, I'll put down my 10-foot, pick that one up, and I notice the difference. You know, I'm used to it, so I'm still able to jig for extended periods of time, but you will absolutely notice the weight difference the longer the pole that you go with. So for vertical jigging, I always say 10 or 11 foot, 11 foot max. If you've got freaking 4 arms of steel, maybe you can handle a longer rod, but hey, to each their own, but that's what I would recommend. All right, so next up we have a question from Tenzin77, and he asks, just curious, how would you rate the Sam Heaton's castability? And, you know, that's actually a really good question. I would say the castability of the rod itself is fine for using it for the purpose that I use it for, which is catching bluegills and shellcracker. But the castability, in my opinion, is more based off of the reel that you put on. I have a President Pfluger 20 on the one, and then I have a Shimano Sahara 500. Both of them ultralight reels. Sometimes when I do casts, specifically on like windy days, it seems to throw the line into like a kind of a weird loop. And I think that's a combination of maybe the line that I'm using with the wind, but sometimes it'll get all bunched up. But that's not a fault of the rod. I think that's more of a fault of the reel, the line weight, but it doesn't happen often enough to where I would recommend against using, 6 or 8 pound test line on any one of those reels. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're using these ultralight setups. Everything is lighter, so just got to be mindful when you're fishing on windy days, because that can and will happen. But as far as the overall castability of the Sam Heaton rod, it's great. I love it. And again, for fishing for bluegills and shell crackers, especially with beetle spins, man, I cannot tell you enough how freaking fun it is to catch fish on that rod. Actually talking to my dad earlier this morning about, looking forward to shell cracker season. Spec fishing's fun, but man, there's something about getting into the big old shellies. Man, it's a real good time. Definitely a home run on the Sam Heatons. Okay, so moving on. Let's see. This one's from Jim Tom 424. He says, on the Rapala R12 video I posted, he says, I just bought one. The blades are a disappointment. Did more tearing than cutting. I have not had that issue. While we're on the topic of the R12, I do want to mention something. So on the one that my dad got, he's been like low-key complaining about the heat of the knife after, we're talking probably 15, 20 fish. He's been mentioning how hot it's been getting, and I've kind of been passing it off as like, oh, I'm sure it's not that hot. And mine, it gets warm, but it's never been hot enough to where I've stopped using it. So actually, the last time I was down in Okeechobee, I was fishing with him and his neighbor, and we came back and we cleaned the fish that we caught, and I was using his knife. I will say that thing got real hot. I mean, I could have kept using it. I mean, I got through all the fish that we needed clean, and I probably could have kept using it if we had more fish, but it was concerning hot. So I told my dad, I said, listen, let me reach out to Rapala and see about getting a warranty replacement, which I've still got it sitting on my dining table right now. I'm trying to find a box I can fit everything into. As far as the blades, though, I've not run into that. So I'm not sure what to say. If it's a recent purchase, reach out to Rapala, see if they'll send you some new blades. I mean, we both really love the R12 minus this new heat issue that he ran into. These electric knives, they're tricky, you know what I mean? And there's a lot of different ones. The Rapala may not be the right fit for you anyway. I mean, you can try a Bubba blade, and there's a lot of corded options that are out there too. So yeah, well, I hope you have better luck and you end up getting that addressed. I think overall the R12, in my opinion, is still hands down the best electric knife that's out there. At least for cleaning, panfish, which is what I use it for 99% of the time. So, all right, next question is from Paul Kimball 6223, and this is on the last Okeechobee video I posted, and he's asking, what jigs do you guys use? That's a pretty large question because we use a lot of different jigs. When it comes to hair jigs, which is what I primarily use, if I'm in Okeechobee, it's going to be bluegrass, blue ice, or electric chicken. I will show you my jig box here. So these right here, these are the bluegrass. Now these are all tied from my buddy Kevin over at Bitter's Bait and Tackle in Longwood, Florida. And a lot of these are experimental jigs that, we're testing to see how the fish like them, that whole kind of thing. So, but yeah, that's what the bluegrass looks like. That does really great in Okeechobee. Electric chicken, pretty common color. That's going to be more like these here. Pink head, green body, sometimes a pink tail. That kind of combination of colors. And then, actually, you know what? I'll even throw in cocaine. That's a super hot color on Okeechobee and very, very common. That's what these look like here. Kind of the all white, flashy tail, and then the heads are kind of white with a little bit of black with a red eye paint. Yeah, these are variations of blue ice, and these colors that I'm talking about, you can get them in plastics. But these are just the custom hair jigs that Kevin has sent me over to try out. But yeah, so those would be the colors I'd recommend for fishing Okeechobee. That's not to say that other colors won't work. As a matter of fact, I mean, I've heard guys use them black and brown and red. Like, I don't think that there's a bad color that you can use on Lake Okeechobee. And there's been days where I'll switch between those colors that I just mentioned, and then they'll prefer one over the other. You'll still get strikes on any of those colors, but some days they just prefer one over the other. So my advice there is to just keep a handful with you when you go out. And if you're having a tough day, switch colors, because that's super important. And, see if they prefer one over the other. But between blue ice, bluegrass, cocaine, and electric chicken, one of those colors is bound to be successful for you. Okay, so next question comes from C Dogger X, and the question was, have you tried using Starbright Deck Wash? I use it on mine and it works great. Now this is in reference to an older video I posted where I briefly talked about the trouble I was having with keeping my sea deck clean on my gator tail. And so to answer this question, I have not used Starbright Deck Cleaner on this before, but I have used like Dawn dish soap, a bleach and water solution, and a pressure washer. I've even purchased the Sea Deck Cleaner directly from Sea Deck. Honestly, the only thing that's done a halfway decent job is just using a pressure washer. Like, I'll spray it down with the Sea Deck Cleaner stuff on there first, because it's supposed to pull up the oils and stuff out of the Sea Deck, and then I'll scrub it down pretty good, and then I'll come back with a pressure washer and hit it with that, and that seems to pull up the nastier stains better than anything else. They're still there, and I'm to the point now to where I don't care anymore. Like, the first, 8 months after purchasing that boat, I was so obsessive about keeping that Sea Deck clean. And at a certain point, after trying so many things, I was like, you know what? I don't care anymore. Like, as often as I use this boat, it's going to get dirty and the Sea Deck is going to get damaged. Like, I bought this boat to use, not to obsess over how clean it looks. And I think there's like a healthy medium there when you own a boat. But it's tough when you buy a brand new boat. You can't get out of that mode of like keeping it pristine. But the reality is, it's a boat and it's never going to stay pristine. I mean, I've got so many dings and dents on that thing already, but that's what builds character in your boat. You know what I mean? So yeah, as far as the cleaners, I quit caring about it. I appreciate the recommendation. Maybe I'll look into that. For anyone else that has had issues with keeping marine mat or sea deck clean, the pressure washer is the way to go. Obviously, you don't want to get too close with it, but at a safe distance, it seems to work the best. Okay, next question comes from Jacko7556, and his question is, what's your least favorite thing to deal with while out on the water? Ooh, well, I know the answer to it. It used to be airboats, and nothing against airboaters. I like going on airboats. They're fun. Anyone who is out fishing and enjoying the peacefulness of the outdoors and the tranquility and just being out enjoying quiet. And then you got a gang of airboats roll through. It ruins your day pretty quick. But it is what it is. It comes with the territory, especially here in Florida. However, with that said, you deal with it. Life goes on. I'd say probably the thing I enjoy the least when fishing on the water is jet skiers, because it seems like every single one that I run into are freaking clueless. Like, they've never used a vessel before, so they don't know the rules and kind of just common courtesy of being on the water with other people in their boats. But those are some of the most obnoxious people on the planet. And whenever I'm out fishing and then I see a freaking gang, because they always travel in packs. Rarely do you see one jet skier. They usually travel with freaking like 5 or 6 or more. They seem like they go out of their way to wake you out. Yeah, that's probably my least favorite thing to deal with on the water. Airboats, like I said, it's, I'm so used to airboats, and most airboaters are friendly. And I get the appeal of airboats. You know, my brother's got one, and his best buddy's got one, and they're really fun to go on. I'd probably never own one because they're not really comfortable to fish out of, and what else am I going to do on a boat? So it doesn't matter what kind of boat that you're dealing with out on the water. There's always going to be those a-holes out there. But jet skiers, they're a different breed. Okay, next question comes from Tommy Pie, and he asks, where can I purchase the grass shrimp jigs that you use? Well, the answer to that is nowhere that I'm aware of. Not yet, anyway. So, as far as these grass shrimp jigs, I have been working with my buddy Kevin, who I mentioned previously, on kind of fine-tuning a series of crappie jigs that work really well for the bodies of water that I most normally fish. Now, on the Withlacoochee River, grass shrimp color is phenomenal. It's very, very good. The most common one that I've been using is something like this, and I'll try to get the camera to pick it up as best I can. But as you can see, it's got a gold head, brown chenille body. It's got some black specks in it, and then it's got that kind of bushy tail that's brown and black. That's the most common style of grass shrimp that I've been using and have been successful with thus far. The newest versions that I've been working with are these. Now this is a wedgie tail that's got orange, black, and gold in it. Yeah, I'll try to get it. I know you'd be better off looking at it close up, but that's the best I can do right now. Same chenille body with the brown and black, and then it's got a gold painted head with some painted eyes on it. This I went out with my dad just yesterday, and I did really well with this color, to the point where he kept trying different colors and stuff that normally do well out there, but I pulled in majority of the fish for that day just using this jig. So as it stands right now, I wouldn't know where to point you to find something similar to this, because it's something that Kevin and I are working on kind of fine-tuning. So when it is available, which will be very soon, I promise, I will make a post about it and let everybody know, and you can buy it from the Slab Store. All right, so Carlos Price asks, do you mind telling me where you got the swiveling balance support on the bow? I kind of had to think about this a little bit after reading that question, but I do know what you're talking about, which I will grab that right now. You guys will occasionally see me use this on my boat, as well as when I'm fishing with my dad down in Okeechobee. So this mounts into like the seat pedestal thing on your boat. Usually people have a couple up front, maybe a couple on the back. But really, the purpose of this thing is mostly to grab onto and kind of lean further out to access some harder to reach holes to jig in. You can also put your rods through here and kind of store them vertically. This is another custom deal. I apologize. A lot of these weird things that we use out on the boat, they're all homemade custom deals. I feel fortunate that, my dad and my uncle, and they're all fabricators by trade. So these kinds of things are like nothing to them, but they're really cool to have on the boat for doing the kind of fishing that we do. So, unfortunately, this, as far as I know, is not anything you could buy. This has to be fabricated. When we are hot on a spot where we're catching a lot of fish, we'll usually throw these on the boat just to kind of get a little more versatility as to where we can fish. So, that's what it is, and hopefully that answers that question. Next up, Sean Baker 1818 asks, I'm new to crappie fishing. I just can't locate them in the St. Johns or Lake George. Do you just pick some pads and have lots of days getting skunked? Well, as far as days getting skunked, there are a lot of them. And they may not all be getting completely skunked. Maybe I'll only pick up one or two fish some days, especially when I'm fishing new water. I mean, a lot of you guys watched my video from some months back where I got skunked on Orange Lake and a little bit of Lockaloosa. That was a hard thing for me to accept, because they're just they're renowned lakes for crappie fishing. So, but if we're talking about St. John's or Lake George, I've not fished Lake George myself, but St. John's, the first time I went on St. John's to fish, I just happened upon a lot of real nice dollarweed, and it was some of the most fantastic vegetation I'd ever seen. So as soon as I see that with the right depth of water underneath it, which is anything above like 1.5 feet is usually enough for specs, I'll jump right into it because I know that there should be fish underneath it. Maybe not in every single spot you pull into, but yeah. So it's really, when I'm fishing a new lake or river or whatever the case may be, I'm looking for the right depth and I'm looking for a unique mix of vegetation. Whether that be dollarweed mixed with lily pads, maybe some water lettuce, maybe water hyacinth. It really just depends on the body of water. But 9 times out of 10, I'm jigging. So that's primarily the kind of vegetation I'm looking for. If you're trolling with minnows or spider rigging, that's a whole different ball game. So in that instance, you're obviously looking for enough depth to do that kind of fishing, but also given the time of year that you're doing it, like right now you could be trolling between sets of lily pads or any kind of vegetation, as long as you've got enough depth. That's a good way to catch them. But yeah, you're definitely gonna have days of getting skunked. That is just a cruel part of this kind of fishing, especially for beginners. But hey, I've been doing this for a lot of years, and I still have those days, especially on lakes that I've never fished before. So it's just something you have to accept and do the best you can with, and try to stay positive. And when it beats you up, you got to go back, try it again, and you will eventually figure it out. Talk to locals, talk to guys at the local bait shops around the lake. But as far as the St. John's goes, all reports that I've been following lately are guys killing it. Certain areas, because it's a very, very long river, so it depends on what area of the state that you're on fishing the St. John's. But the St. John's always has a beautiful selection of vegetation to jig. So that's, if I were you and you're out on the St. John's, look for dollarweed. There might be some hyacinth in there, and just look for water. I just say like 2 foot or deeper underneath that vegetation. And you can do lily pads too. If you're not catching anything within like 10 or 15 minutes in that spot, just move on down to the next patch and you'll eventually get into some fish. So just be patient, have confidence in what you're fishing. Anyway, hopefully that helps, but don't give up and stick to it, and you will get into them. All right, Mr. Blake Shaw 5272 asks, do you like to fish upwind or downwind side better? Well, Mr. Blake, I'd have to say whatever end is not in the general direction of my dad's farts, that's going to be the the side that I'm going to fish. But in all seriousness, I don't really know how to best answer that question. Generally, I'm going to be facing the boat into the wind. That way I can have a little better control over the boat. But honestly, if it's a real windy day, buddy, you're going to have a tough time doing whatever it is you're going to try to do. You got to work with the wind as best as you can, and that's something that you develop, how you handle it the more that you're out in it. But some days it's just so windy that it's miserable, and then you give up. So that's all I can really say about that. Okay, so Emu12X says, Okeechobee has been tough to fish this year. Any thoughts on why that is? Well, I guess I can agree to a certain extent that it's tougher than it was last year, but I wouldn't say overall it's like a super tough bite. It's just, you got to figure this season's a completely different playing field than last year, and that's mostly due to the 2 big hurricanes that we had roll through. I remember when we first went to Harney Pond not long after the last hurricane, and we were just looking for a lot of the stuff that we had fished last season, and just things were completely gone. It was just open water. We knew right then and there it's just going to be like, okay, well, this season is going to be different. And it definitely was. It started out really hot. A lot of guys were fishing bulrush and cattails and freaking killing it. a little bit earlier in the season, and now it seems like it's kind of spread out. I mean, there's still guys catching them out there and that stuff, but then it seems like the last month or two, everyone's been fishing the river. Even most of the guides I know are out there, long line and minnows or jigs, and I know we went out there with the pontoon. Granted, one day there was a crappie tournament going on. I think the Sunshine State Crappie Trail, something like that. So it was ate up with boats, but even just on a regular day, the river has never been as busy as I've seen it this year. And it's not like every crappie in Lake Okeechobee's filtered into the river. There's still plenty out on the lake. They're definitely harder to get into, it seems like. So as far as do I know why that is or have any kind of explanation towards that? The hurricane's really messing up the playing field. Our winter so far here in Florida has been pretty crazy. It's been very much up and down temperature-wise. And I feel like that really always throws specs for a loop. So there's probably something to be said about that. And then, of course, FWC doing what they do best and spraying aquatics. That's a whole other can of worms there. So there's a lot of different factors at play. But I don't believe that there's less fish biting this year. I just feel like the fish are more spread out. So it's a little bit more difficult to pinpoint large numbers. A resource that I've recommended on multiple occasions, Lake Okeechobee Crappie Club. It's a Facebook page that you can join, and every day you'll see guys posting limits. So the fish are still being caught. You got to be in the right place at the right time, and you have to adapt. Every year you have to adapt. That's kind of all I have to say about that. All right, so next question we have here is from Tani McElvaney, and he says, another great video. I don't think I've seen you guys fish the reeds and cattails before, just the thick weeds. If you don't mind me asking, what rods did you and your father use on this trip, and were they light, medium, or heavy? Because those were hogs you guys were swinging into the boat. The rods that we always use are the rods we always use, honestly. The ACC crappie sticks, and I've got my Ozark hybrid. I think those are medium action rods. I'll be honest, I don't know offhand. Really, any vertical jigging rod you get is going to be able to pull them hogs in. I don't think it matters if it's a lighter weight like my Ozark hybrid. It's a little more nimble than the ACCs. But dude, I've pulled in some of the biggest slabs I've ever caught with that rod. So honestly, I don't think you really need to focus so much on that. Just get yourself a good vertical jigging rod, whether it be ACC, Ozark, B&M. They're all going to do the job, and they're all going to bring in big old slabs. All right, next question is from Michael, and he says, thank you. We learn a lot. Where can we buy the chute on your cooler? And, it's actually been a while since I've had this question, and it used to be the only question I'd ever get. But I think people finally started catching on to what it was, where to get it, and now it seems like I get more questions on the weed puller than I do anything. But anyway, the chute is called the Catch Counter, and you can find a link to purchase it in the description of each one of my videos. If you purchase it from that link, I get a small kickback from Amazon. But you can also purchase it directly from Catch Counter at catchcounter.com. And you can buy it with a cooler already attached to a cooler, or you can buy just the chute, which is typically what we do. And it's been great. Anytime we go out and plan on getting into some numbers, we're always sure we have it on the boat. We've had to adjust the spring on it from time to time. But other than that, it's been great. No complaints. But yeah, that's where you can get it if you wanted to pick it up for yourself. All right, so we are fixing to wrap up this Q&A, and last question I have here is a question I've been getting a lot lately, and it's usually over email. Basically, do I do fishing charters? I've had a lot of different ways this has been asked to me, and unfortunately, no. I do not do fishing charters. I don't do consulting. I don't do any of that stuff. But most of the guys that ask me this are looking for me to charter on Okeechobee. I always say the same thing. There are so many guides on Okeechobee already, and a lot of them are really great. The one that I always recommend is Brad Gibson with G3 Outfitters. I've run into him on the lake several times. He definitely knows the lake very well. He's won a lot of tournaments. As far as a guide I'd recommend, it would be Brad. But, I get it. A lot of guys would really prefer me to to take them out, you know, even if it's like on a consulting standpoint. If you really want to go with a guide, though, like I said, Brad Gibson with G3 Outfitters. You can just look him up on Google, and he will definitely set you up with some fish. Most of the guys are trolling the river right now. I'm sure if you specifically request to jig, they'll put you out there the best they can. I don't know what the bite's going to be like, but yeah, as far as me offering charters, that's unfortunately not something I can do right now. You know, I do IT full time. That's my full time job. So I'm doing that hard, you know, Monday through Friday, and then I do this YouTube stuff on the side when I get free time, and when I'm not editing videos or making videos, I'm out fishing. So realistically, I don't have the time to do any kind of charters or anything. So I do apologize, but I appreciate all you guys that reach out to me and would love for me to bring you out. I'd love to be able to do it and meet a lot of you guys and put you on fish. I actually get more pleasure out of putting people on fish and watching people catch fish on my boat who, you know, are just buddies of mine I take out and stuff. Like, that's almost more satisfying than me going out catching fish. Like, I just absolutely love it, especially kids and stuff, to see how excited they get, you know, pulling in slabs and stuff. It's just, it's satisfying for me. So I know I would love doing charters the way my life is. I don't think I would have the time for it. So, all right. Well, I think that's going to wrap up this first official Q&A. So thank you guys so much for sticking around and watching if you did. And one last thing I want to mention before I go. Once I hit 5,000 subs, I'm going to give something away. If y'all want a chance to win one of these catch counters, we need to get me to 5,000 subs. I'm pretty close. I think I'm at like 4,300 right now. I'm going to make a video explaining how you can enter to win one of these catch counters, and then one lucky person is going to get one of these at their doorstep. Let's share these videos, get the channel out there for more people to watch and learn. And thank you guys so much for watching. If you have more questions and stuff, just keep, you know, leaving them on the video. Shoot me an email on social media. You can find me on TikTok at brentallenoutdoors. I've got a Facebook page at brentallenoutdoors. Of course, the YouTube channel for all my videos and content. But yeah, just shoot me a question whenever you have one. I'll add it to the list, and I'm going to make these Q&A videos kind of like an ongoing series. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch y'all on the next one.